Joining us right now is Harvard Law Professor Emeritus and author of Electile Dysfunction, A Guide to Unaroused Voters. Alan Dershowitz is here. Alan, you got to connect the dots on that one for me.
Well, remember, I said on this show over and over again that the big issue in front of the court was going to be, is this order constitutional on its face? And if a different president, say if Hillary Clinton had won or if Barack Obama had enacted this order, would it be constitutional? And by saying yes, I think the lawyer for the government conceded in many respects. I think the lawyer conceded the case. Now, the other side made a concession as well. The other side was asked, what if President Trump had said, oh, Muslims are bad, bad people? Would that strike down the statute? And the lawyer for the government said, yes, that would strike down the statute. One of the judges said, be careful, you're opening the door too much. So both sides have made concessions. But the key issue that the Supreme Court will decide, and this will go to the Supreme Court, is whether you look at the ban on its face or you look at what a candidate said while running for office. And I believe the court will ultimately say you look at the order on its face. You don't look at what a candidate said previously.
Before he took the oath of office.
That's right.
Governor?
Well, I just find the whole thing amazing that we're even having the argument. And, Alan, I have appreciated your clarity on this because from the beginning, I've heard you repeatedly say this is not about how you feel about Donald Trump. It's not even about whether you agree with his policies.
That's right.
You may think his policies are totally off the wall, but it's whether he has the legal authority to do it. As a duly elected president, he can make this decision. He made this decision. If you don't like it, don't elect him another time.
Yeah, but guess what? Now the judges have done enough to just keep this order from going through. So whether you like it or not, this is they were successful in stalling it.
That's right, for the moment. But remember, too, that the countries that were picked, and some of the judges focused on the country, they were picked by President Obama. They were in his original order. So all President Trump did was saying, I'm going to take President Obama's original order, I'm eliminating one country, and I'm going to impose a 90-day ban. I don't think this is going to be a hard case for the Supreme Court. I think they're going to uphold the ban. There's a big difference, as the governor said, between approving of a statute as a matter of policy and striking it down as unconstitutional. And Sally Yates misunderstood that distinction herself when she said, I think I disagree with the policy behind the statute, but she couldn't quite bring herself to make the argument that it was unconstitutional when she refused to enforce it. Now, as the acting attorney general, she should have litigated this, even if she disagreed with it. Leave it to the courts. As one of the senators said, who appointed her to the Supreme Court?
You say this is going to the Supreme Court.
Absolutely.
So what does it boil down to for the Supreme Court?
For the Supreme Court, it boils down to an issue of first impression, never before decided by the Supreme Court. If you have an order that on its face is constitutional, but was written by a president who said things as a candidate that might suggest some religious bias, although I think that's even somewhat questionable, can you take into account what the candidate said in looking at an order that's otherwise constitutional and find it unconstitutional?
Why would you? Why would that be?
As one of the judges put it, what if you had a guy who ran for office? Say if Marina Le Pen had run in the United States. And she clearly had some racist views, anti-Muslim racist views. And she said, when I get elected, I'm going to make sure no Muslims ever come into this country. Then she gets elected and enacts an order. The question is, can you take an extreme statement like that into account? Now, nothing President Trump said even
came close to that. Exactly. So it's hard to imagine that because Trump never said anything like that.
Well, what he said was a Muslim ban. That was a shortcut. And then he had Rudy Giuliani said something that I found to be very ambiguous. I think what Rudy Giuliani said is the president told me to make it legal. And making it legal means don't make it a Muslim ban. Make it something else. Make it a ban on terrorism. And I think that's what ultimately, in the second order, particularly, the administration did. So if I were betting widows' and orphans' money on the outcome of this case, I would bet on the Supreme Court, not even 5-4, but probably 6-3 or 7-2, upholding this order.
Alan, one of the questions that came out of yesterday with Sally Yates was from the senator from Louisiana who said, we have a presumption that a law is constitutional until it's declared not to be. Speak to that, because I thought that was a very powerful moment, and Sally Yates could not really respond to that.
Well, it's a very important question, and that is, let's assume you have an attorney general. Let's assume you had a statute that said black people have to drink from different water fountains. You're never going to get that. But something was obviously unconstitutional. Sally Yates is right about something like that. The attorney general of the United States can't defend that, even if the Supreme Court hasn't yet declared it unconstitutional, because it's so clear. But But if you have an arguable case, and yesterday's hearing makes it clear it was arguable. You had half the judges one way, half the judges the other way. If you're the Attorney General, you're a lawyer, you're an advocate for one side, you make the case for its constitutionality, you leave it to the courts to decide. That's what the adversary system's about.
Dagan, what do you think?
Alan, because this is specific, let's say that this travel ban case goes to, as you said, it will go to the Supreme Court. How will this decision be applied in our everyday lives? Like, how would it be applied to other cases potentially?
Remember, it's only a 90-day ban, so it's not going to have a big impact on the daily lives of anybody. If you're a person from one of those states and you're prudent, you don't travel while the ban's in effect. You don't get yourself into a situation where you might get detained. But after 90 days, we may have a new law. That would probably have to be enacted by Congress, and we'll see whether Congress would broaden it beyond that. Look, the issue of discrimination against Muslims is a real one all over the world, and we have to deal with it. The question is the context. Muslim Americans have a right not to be discriminated against. But there's nothing in the Constitution that gives that right to a person in Yemen of Muslim faith who's never come to the United States, who wants to have the right, it's not a right, it's a privilege to come and travel to the United States. So you have to distinguish between Americans and people who just want to come to our country.
We're going to be arguing for years over a 90-day ban.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, that's true. You're right, 90 days.
Like, what does it say about the security risk that they're trying to address in this 90-day ban? That, you know, we've gone a long period without it being in place, and you know, we haven't had terror acts here.
And I think you can make a strong argument in policy that this is not the best way to protect us, but that's for the president to decide. That's for maybe Congress to decide ultimately. The courts aren't experts in weighing the security advantages and disadvantages of one program over the other. They're experts only in deciding on the constitutionality.
Don't you think, though, that it was right to fire Sally Yates for not carrying out her duty?
I think that she invited firing for not carrying out her duty, and when it happened, I criticized her. I said she should have carried out her duty. She should only quit when she is absolutely certain that no reasonable court would ever find that the ban was constitutional. This ban did not reach that criteria. Even the first ban didn't reach that criteria.